The episode opens somewhere out in the dungeons. At a crossroads of tunnels, there is a rapid pitter-patter of footfalls as someone is running down one of these hallways, and we see them come into view, and it is Torug, member of the Clan of Rings that we ran into with Sybil all the way back in one of the first labyrinths we ever entered. He is once again out in the dungeons, scouting around for something, and we quickly realize why he is running down this hallway. He is being pursued by a lichen rook, and he slips and falls as he's trying to take the turn really quickly. He scrambles back up to his knees and he turns around and he realizes he's taken a turn at this intersection where he's not going to be able to get away. He turns around and he brandishes the weapon that he has, which I imagine is some kind of maybe pickaxe or something like that. Certainly not enough, as this medium-sized lichen rook, size of a car, just barrels into this intersection and turns on Torug. He's looking very nervous, and then, even worse, the lichen rook begins to back up, and Torug looks behind him and sees, phasing through the stone wall of this section of the dungeons, is a spectral rook. He just drops down to his knees in the fetal position and just says, "This is it? This is how..." It takes a second before he realizes, I'm not dead. He opens his eyes and looks around and sees that the lichen rook is completely motionless. He turns and looks at the spectral rook, who is quickly fading away, its chain silently rattling as it is pulled deep into the dungeons to wherever those spectral rooks are chained to. He stands up, looking around. It's a miracle. No, it's not a miracle. It's Stillnights. He offers a prayer, does a gesture, speaks a blessing, scurries to pick up his bag and all the things that he may have dropped when he fell down, and he leaves, oddly enough, the lichen rook standing right there. There's plenty to be harvested or taken from this lichen rook, but he just walks right by it. He actually slaps it on the leg or something like that and just laughs. And then he breaks into a run once again back in the direction of Oubliette. He is yelling, completely unafraid of anyone hearing him, the attention that may be drawn towards him, and he is yelling, "It's Stillnights! It's Stillnights! Everyone, come out and see!" Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Colossal Dungeons here on the Rene Plays Games podcast. The last episode ended pretty intensely, so we're going to dial it way back for this episode and do something that I probably should have done closer to the holidays, but you're getting it roughly a month late, and we're going to do a Stillnights episode. Before that, though, let's just go over some quick announcements. I hope that you've listened to the first Perspective Checks interview of the year with PJ Sack of A Wasteland Story and the Solo Role Players podcast. It was a great talk with another solo creator. Obviously, I have interviewed quite a few people that I love their solo content out there in podcast land, and PJ is no different. I hope that you've gotten a chance to go check him out and listen to his many, many great series and games that he has played on his podcast, as well as A Wasteland Story, which is so good. And when this goes live, we are 1 week away from my very first Twitch stream of the year. Spoilers, I have not set up my Twitch account yet. I really got to get on that. But with the Twitch stream, I'm going to talk behind the scenes of my series. I'm going to talk about mining media. We're going to pick a piece of media to talk about what is worth mining for your tables. And I'm going to do some live design stuff, keep people aware of what's going on, what I'm working on. We're going to talk about the new games that I've gotten in since the last month's live Twitch stream, and that's always fun. We can dive into as much or as little as we want of those, or get excited, or you can let me know if a game that I just got is something you want to see played on the podcast or hear. And we'll do some looking forward. Like for this month, Zine Quest is next month. Zine Quest on Kickstarter, Zinetopia on BackerKit. We'll try our best to take a look and see if we can find some exciting projects from creators that we like or anything like that, and just get hyped about new games that you might want to play in the near future. Other than that, the fourth week is going to be the first of the design diaries for 2026, and I know I talk a lot about Gardens of Rust. I'm going to do at least 4 months on that starting in March, but the first month of the year, I'm going to talk about my 2-player buddy cop game called Detectives, which is very, very, very close to being done, and by talking about it at the end of this month, I'm going to put a timer on myself to say this will be out in like a month or two. Promise. Hold me to it. And speaking of holding me to it, you came here to listen to some Colossal, so let's play another episode of Colossal Dungeons. Okay, so this episode is going to be the closest to like a beach episode, if you're familiar with that term from, I think it's an anime term, that we're going to do in this series. Last episode, the Castle Revolving Major Labyrinth absolutely whooped Sybil's butt. And it was very, very hard. It's a lot to get through, and I appreciate that. I think the design of it is actually really great. You got to go in there ready. You're not getting out. It is very oppressive with its elemental characteristics, changing how each room plays, as well as the encounters that are in the table for the exploration of Castle Revolving. It whittled our resources down by a lot, and I used every resource at my disposal, kind of cheesing it the way that I do in Colossal, and I needed to use the Waypoint Stone to get out of dodge. We ended last episode with Sybil returning to Garden, the headquarters of the Clan of Cups, the healers and housing people of the city of Oubliette, and she stood there with her friends, the 2 little rooklings, her ice rookling and her lichen rot rookling, as well as Zorn, the Bastion monk, and she stood up, coughed out some smoke from the element that was the prevailing elemental characteristic when we had to leave, and fell to the ground unconscious, asking for healing. Where we pick up in this episode with Sybil is that she is waking up in a bed being cared for by members of the Clan of Cups. And I believe it would not be long before Lisette herself, leader of the Clan of Cups, is called to come check on her friend. We've discussed this multiple times, the few times we've been back to the city of Oubliette. Sybil seems to have a pretty good relationship with both Lisette and Tehenna, the leaders of the Clan of Cups and the Clan of Keys, respectively. And Sybil has no idea that it is Stillnights because she left in a desperate act of self-preservation. And when she wakes up in this bed, she kind of gets up with a startle. And she looks around and Lisette is there, smiling, sitting on her bed, on the edge of her bed, and puts a calm hand on Sybil's arm and says, "You're okay. It's okay." And Sybil looks around and says, The rooklings, the monk," she's trying to stretch and she's definitely injured. "We still have not recovered any of our exploration or combat scores. We will do that in this downtime. It's been a few days, or will have been a few days by the time Sybil leaves here, so we will leave here at full scores for the sake of narrative." And Sybil sits up and looks around, and Lisette smiles at her and says, "Yes, they are fine. Actually, as rooklings and a bastion, they were not as affected as you by the smoke inhalation or other injuries that you seemed to suffer in protecting them. Zorn told me everything, what happened in that strange labyrinth that you found, and I appreciate you trying to find the goblet of healing for me, but I told you not to go get yourself hurt." Sybil sighs, relieved that her friends are safe, and looks up at Lisette and says, "Yeah, well, the dungeons aren't exactly a safe place, are they?" And Lisette once again nods and says, "They are not. Or, I guess, they are right now. But normally, they're not." Sybil looks confused up at Lisette. "What do you mean, they're not right now?" And Lisette says, do you have Stillnights where you come from, on the surface? And Sybil's eyes go wide. You have Stillnights? Down here? And Lisette smiles and says, do you think you can walk? I'd love to take you somewhere. And she helps Sybil up out of bed, and they're going to walk around the city of Oubliette, and we will see it in all of its glory during the celebration known as Stillnights. So mechanically, Stillnights is a Patreon exclusive as far as I can tell. It may be part of the Moat book that is coming out soon for Colossal. It was another expansion, another new area, much like, the Roomlands book, and then the Kyodana book, and then the Dungeons book. The Moat may have Stillnights as an official thing, but it came out as a part of the Patreon additional PDFs that you get if you subscribe to Nick's Patreon, which I highly recommend you do if you like Colossal. But Stillnights is a festival in which all of the rooks in the Roomlands and the Colossal everywhere just go still. It usually lasts around 3 days, sometimes up to a whole week, sometimes more, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's only a day. But because of the immensity and the importance of something like this happening to the people, the inhabitants of the Roomlands, there's obviously a lot of tradition that has come up as a result of the rooks going still for a few days. Down in Oubliette, much like around the surface in the Roomlands, there is what is known as a Stillnights stone. With Oubliette, where the whole city is hanging from stalactites, and there are bridges and arches and all of these things that connect these hanging stalactites where houses are built all around, I think that the Stillnights stone might actually be a stalagmite, something that is protruding up from the water and the ground below the city of Oubliette, and it's one particularly tall one where maybe they've created like a balcony or a huge deck at the bottom of Oubliette, where when it is Stillnights, all of the inhabitants of the city come and they give their offerings to the Stillnights stone. The tradition being that offerings made at this time will extend the stillness of the rooks for a period of time. And the sacrifices can be anything, really. It can be something that you have made for the year. It can be something that you just want to give to the rooks or to the Colossal itself to thank them for this moment of reprieve. And sure enough, Sybil is able to do this as well. She goes with Lisette, and they stand before this as people are lined up waiting to make their offerings. And I think that after they do this, Sybil realizes that down here in the dungeons, much like on the surface, this is a time where the average person can wander completely safely and comfortably around places that may normally be quite dangerous. And she sees Talena and the clan of Keys. They have set themselves up as kind of party leaders or chaperones for groups of people who want to wander out into the dungeons for whatever reason, maybe to go find some resources or just walk around places they normally can't go. And it's a big event. And I think that, each of the clans has their part in it, except maybe the Cult of Shards. We'll see about that. And Lisette continues to walk with Sybil, walking her around as we see everything that's happening in this peaceful time in an otherwise pretty chaotic city down here in the dungeons, and dangerous place, the dungeons themselves. Sybil is familiar, and to clarify what happened in the intro, the reason that Torug did not take anything from the Lycanrook that he had encountered is because during Stillnights, you can beat a rook. You can take things from a rook. You can take like the helm. You can take all of these things that you would normally get from it, an arm, a piece, whatever, except during Stillnights, all of those things that are harvested, they don't work. Ever. Even when the rooks turn back on and start wandering once again, whatever's been taken from them during Stillnights will never be active. So it is really a time of just reprieve for Roomlanders. As Lisette walks Sybil around, she takes her to what she describes as one of her favorite places in all of Oubliette. And when they get there, Sybil is a little surprised. I'm going to flip a card for the exploration and just see what happens. The 3 of spades says a quiet street, a few small independent shops, a handful of citizens wandering, and Sybil looks around and says, "For all the amazing things in this city, what makes this your favorite?" "No offense." And Lisette smiles and says, "None taken. This is a street technically owned by the Clan of Cups, and it's for people who are starting over. People we've helped. People who needed a new purpose and found one. We let them open these shops and pursue a new way of life from whatever it was that came before that they needed to let go of. And it's just wonderful to see what people can do when they think that maybe there was nothing else for them." Sybil smiles and says, "Yeah, I get that. You know, I had a shop of my own up in Parapet. I wonder what's going on with it now. Been gone a while. But, oddly enough, I don't miss it. I mean, I do miss it, but right now I'm occupied enough with too many questions that have bothered me for my whole life, all of a sudden teasing me with answers maybe down here. And I thought I'd be itching to go back to the surface and get back to my life. It was my life. It was what I defined myself by, but now it's amazing down here." Lisette says, "I'm glad you think so. You can always start over too." And Sybil laughs and goes, "Oh, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I don't think I'll be staying down here forever, but hey, with this," and she holds up her waypoint stone, "I could probably come visit really whenever." And Lisette smiles and says, "I hope you do." We're going to do some Oubliette stuff and maybe get to a couple other things. This is going to be a shorter episode, like I said, a beach episode, some just downtime, some just living in the setting that Nick has created. The Colossal's setting is so cool, and there is so much room for good questions that just build out the world, and I'm sure my Colossal is very different than a lot of other people's. You know, I read the Discord, and I'm like, whoa, people come up with such cool things, and I'm doing, you know, what I'm doing, and I love my setting, but I really think that, you know, if you're looking for a solo game, this is a really good one, because the art is so inspiring and inviting to just kind of come up with themes and tones for whatever it is you want to play. So, real quick, I have a few things that we should do now that we're back in Oubliette. First of those being, let's drop off stuff to all of the clans. We get unique, you know, we get those labyrinth treasures, and when you turn those in, after enough visits, you know, you might prompt a scene with the leaders of the clans. So let's go in order. And you know what? We're here with Lisette, so why don't we walk back to Garden? I think the narrative reason for this is Sybil is still not fully recovered, so Lisette is walking with her, telling her not to push herself too hard, and Lisette gets back to her room and says, "Oh, I know this is a silly time to do this, but I did pick up some cups in the dungeons out in some labyrinths. Do you guys want them?" And Lisette nods and says, "Always. It helps us quite a bit with giving people what they need. Medicine, water, to combat rook rot. All of it. I appreciate you." And despite this being our third visit and delivery of labyrinth treasures in the form of these cups, we do not trigger the third visit thing, because that only happens when we return with the Goblet of Healing, which she has sent us out for in search of in a labyrinth. We've yet to flip a yes, this is the one where it is. So maybe we'll get there by the end of this series, maybe not. Alright, moving on, we will go to the Clan of Rings. We did just hear Torug yelling as he ran back into the city, and I think that sure enough, we'll have an interaction with him as Sybil smiles walking into the Clan of Rings and says, "I heard you made quite a scene rushing back into the city," and Torug just kind of sheepishly smiles and scratches the back of his head, and he says, "Yeah, well, I guess I got lucky, honestly," and he tells her, "I wouldn't have survived if it wasn't for Stillnights. I was cornered by a Lycan Rook and a Spectral Rook," and a bunch of people in the Clan of Rings kind of like slam their tankards down and just goes like, "Yeah, there he is, like the survivor, the miracle survivor." And yeah, Torug, once again, just big talk and just has become this really funny figure that people kind of gravitate to. And Sybil smirks and says, yeah, real hero. And she claps him on the back and says, where's your clan leader? I have some rings he might be interested in. Points over to the clan leader of rings, which is Gorin and his rookling tongs. And I believe we didn't have any rings the second time we came, so this is the second visit. This time, Tongs will rush over to Sybil, knowing that she has two little rookling friends, and seems excited to see her. And Gorin lets out a laugh and says, Yeah, I know, Tongs. And he waves Sybil over. As she hands over the rings, he looks at them and nods appraisingly, and then he looks up at Sybil and says, I'm sorry I've been so short with you. I didn't know Surface Roomlander was going to stick around and be so useful. To be honest, I should have thanked you more for saving Torug that first time. He brings Sybil into the inner circle of the clan headquarters. It is a even more well-furnished and well-stocked kind of blacksmithing area. He isn't the most well-spoken of people, but he eventually gets to the point which he kind of lets on that if Sybil's going to be around, it could be really profitable for them to work together. I know you've been out there in the dungeons more than most, and I don't trust Helena to do this without asking for some cut of it that I'm not willing to give. And I'm not saying I'm not going to pay you handsomely for doing me a favor, but if you could. He explains that a criminal cartel down here in the dungeons has been stealing his merchandise and money, taking it back to their labyrinth somewhere nearby Oubliette. He thinks someone within his clan is betraying him, so he can't give it to someone like Torug, and admitting this to someone like Helena, well, that's not good for clan reputation. So he has done a little bit of digging and thinks he knows where this labyrinth is. We can go bust this cartel. Oh, that's fun. I like that. Obviously, we are still dealing with maybe going back to Castle Revolving with our waypoint stone, but that's fun. Those of you who know me know that I love a good mafia storyline, and throw in the word cartel. You've got my attention, Gorin. And now we can move on to the next clan, and let's save the creepy cult of shards for last. Let's go visit our friend Helena. As I mentioned before, I think that during Stillnights, if a lot of the inhabitants and citizens of Oubliette want to take this opportunity to go wander the dungeons that they never get to go out into, I think that the Clan of Keys is quite busy as they are moving people around, chaperoning, protecting groups as they wander off into the dungeons, because there's no promise that this is going to last 3 days, and if people get caught out there and the rooks start moving again, the Clan of Keys, as the explorers, mappers, etc., are going to need to be able to protect people as they retreat back towards the city of Oubliette. So the atmosphere in the Clan of Keys is not so much celebratory as elsewhere. It is actually a time where maybe they're doing more work than usual, but it's not intense work. And because of this, there's no prompt for a third visit of the delivery of keys, and I think that when Sybil sees Helena is actually a little overwhelmed. She's like, Hi, Sybil. It's so great to see you. I'm sorry, right now is not the best time for us, but thank you for delivering these keys. She looks at the one around her neck and says, I had somebody out looking for, I'll tell you another time. Right now, we're a little busy. And she looks and she says, actually, when this all dies down after Stillnights, if you're still in the city, can you come see me? I would love to see you and talk to you about something. And Sybil just nods and sees that she's kind of spread thin right now, gives Helena a hug and says, yeah, and you know what, if you need me to take a look at your mounts or anything like that, after all this is done, let me know. And Helena nods and says, of course, I'll talk to you soon. There's not an event with the Clan of Keys until the 5th visit, so we're closing in on that, but I do have an idea for Helena. But there's a few other things we gotta do first, such as going to those creepy Cult of Shards people. And this is our third visit delivering shards. Usually, all that happens when you turn in the Labyrinth Treasures of Shards at the window at the front of the massive Gothic kind of headquarters of the Cult of Shards is you hand them over and nothing else happens. The silent person at the window accepts them, nods, and you leave. Except this time, the kiosk operative seems to recognize Sybil. When Sybil hands over her shards and expects nothing more to come of this, she just kind of slaps the counter and says, "All right, well, see you guys next time." But the operative grabs Sybil's wrist, and at first she's worried, and she flinches and pulls it back, and they immediately look sorry, and they actually speak. A muted voice comes out from underneath the hood, and this person, this cultist, says, "Monolith would like to meet with you." Sybil looks at them and says, "Really? Where?" And the cultist opens a little side door to the kiosk and says, "You are welcome inside. Please follow me if you would." Sybil looks around, and I think at this point she doesn't have her companions with her. Or you know what, for the sake of this, let's say that the Ice Rookling is with her, because it would have been very concerned about her progress, and I think that maybe, yeah, for this, Zorn is attempting to speak more with the Rookrot, like we discussed how the Rookling is completely like unattuned like the other Rooklings to the Rookling Forge, but the Ice Rookling is with Sybil as she follows this attendant into the interior of the Cult of Shards headquarters. The large Gothic doors creak open, and she's guided through just gloomy stone passageways, tall vaulted halls, and then eventually she's led into a study where the attendant does not follow, but Sybil and the Rookling descend a set of stairs down into this. A tall bastion stands before her, its rook-like kind of turret-looking head sticking out from the top of a robe that is attached at two oversized pauldrons on either shoulder and then flows down all the way to the ground. It is dark, almost completely black, but it can't be completely black because just visible in it is a symbol prominent on both the front and back of this robe, and it is almost like an arrow pointed down. "I should thank you for your work finding shards. Few care to find them, and even those that do fear bringing them to us. But you, Surface Roomlander, you will be remembered." Its voice is very monotone and almost echoes out from the bastion-like body. It's hard to tell if it's actually coming from the turret-like head or if it's just coming from inside that large robe. "I cannot let you in on all of our work, but rest assured, we are working towards a goal, and when the time comes, we will need help. I do not ask for you to commit to helping us, especially given how little you are allowed to know. But know, we appreciate your assistance thus far." Sybil begins to ask questions, and the leader does not even seem to respond. Eventually, Monith turns, and after a few questions, the sudden movement silences Sybil, and she says, "Oh," and he says, "Unfortunately, I cannot answer any of your questions, but I wanted you to know you are welcome. And if you help us, there is benefit in it for you. I am tired. Please, You may leave, but do not be a stranger. Sybil knows enough to know that that was a dismissal, and she just shrugs and looks down at the ice rookling, who also shrugs, and they walk out. The attendant opens the door and then ushers them back out into the city of Oubliette, and she looks down at the ice rookling when they've left and says, "Hard to say don't be strangers when I just met you, you've invited me inside, and I still don't know anything about you." And then the rookling kind of nods in agreement and she says, "But you know what? I still kind of like them. They're fun." And the ice rookling shakes its head as they go off. A few more things I want to do during this downtime. Stillnights is happening. I think that there's another bit of rest for Sybil. And a couple of things that I want to do is, we're back. We have treasures. Let's spend them. I think that the merchant Corey is probably likely having a big Stillnights sale or something like that. And I'm not going to actually put discounts on the treasure costs in the book of the dungeons, but let's go ahead and buy a few things. I think that Sybil is going to re-outfit her friendly little ice rookling, who she still has not named. Because that is too much of a connection, admitting that she actually likes it. But we will buy a new set of rookling armor, and she's going to buy it a weapon as well. So this is going to give us one additional card for our combat phases that is used by our rookling friend. Pretty cool. I feel like that's fun. And then there is a 2 treasure item that I like, which is called a Guardian Compass. For 2 treasures, you can skip right to the Guardian room of any labyrinth. You do not have to go through all of the cards to get there, and that's pretty awesome. I think that the assumption is that you get right to the Guardian, but probably still have to get your way out of the labyrinth as normal, but that could be really cool, especially if we flip and find out that it is where, like, the Goblet of Healing or whatever is. And the last 2 things that I want to do here in Oubliette are, 1, find a lapidarist to identify the unique rookstone that we found in the not major labyrinth that we were led to by the spectral rooks and the whisper stone. We don't know what that does yet. And there are no guidelines for creating unique rookstones. It kind of just says you can decide what this means to you and your story and what powers it has. And I have some ideas because so far since falling into the cistern and finding what she has found, Sybil has a Whisper Stone, which is a unique rookstone that has shattered all of her previously held hopes and solidified them as truth. She has found this other unique rookstone. The Whisper Stone has allowed her to interact with spectral rooks in a way that almost no one else can. They will not target her because of it. She has found a spear, which allows her to strike the spectral chains and presumably the figures themselves, but she has not done that. And it led her to yet another unique rookstone. So I'm going to flip 3 cards and consult the Roomlands Oracle and just see what that says, if it makes any sense. Maybe it's something we can use for an idea of what this does. A 6 of spades, a 6 of diamonds, and a jack of clubs. Okay, consulting the oracles, the story oracles in the Roomlands book, we get... Ooh, I like going right in order. We get rescue someone from a powerful artifact. With a twist, a rook appears, but something is strange. That is very in line with what we have been doing so far in this campaign down here in the dungeons. Rescue someone, rooklings perhaps, from a powerful artifact, a rookling forge perhaps, with a twist that a rook appears, but something is strange. Spectral rooks. This is perfect. Okay, well that gives us an idea of the story that we are still doing, and it's dead on for what's been going on. But what does that mean for this unique rookstone? Well, if it has to do with the Rookling Forge, and it has to do with these spectral rooks, they led Sybil here, right, through this Whisper Stone. maybe it's another sort of like spectral ability. The Whisper Stone isn't a spectral ability, but it's almost like a neutralizing stone that labels her not as a threat or an enemy to the spectral rooks. What if this one, it was bound in spectral chains when we found it? What if this one gives the holder powers like that of whatever this spectral chain, this whatever is creating these spectral rooks? What if it's tied to that? I don't know how the rook stones are supposed to work. Obviously, this Whisper Stone does what it does, makes us uninteresting to spectral rooks. Our Waypoint Stone allows us to do stuff. I think it's pretty freeform narrative. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is a phase stone. And the Lapidarist pulls back from it with his little jeweler's loop eye piece and, you know, whatever experimentation they have to do on it to determine its capabilities. And almost like sputters and stutters, and this defies. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like this. He actually does not touch it with his hands, but instead grabs it with like a set of tongs and holds it out to Sybil and says, "If you wouldn't mind, please hold this and let me confirm something." Sybil holds her hands out and holds it, and he kind of puts like a gyroscope looking thing around it. It's not a particularly large stone, and it kind of floats in the middle of it, and he says, "Okay, do not be alarmed." And he like spins one of the rings of this gyroscope around it, and it begins spinning the rest of them. I think this is going to allow us to not to steal from like Lord of the Rings like Frodo. I don't think it makes us invisible, but I think what it does is it phases us into that spectral realm. And the use of this is going to be twofold. In combat, it will allow us once per turn to avoid a wound from losing a card. It will avoid a direct hit. And out of combat, if we can find any narrative way to use this kind of phasing spectral form, maybe passing through labyrinth walls, or maybe it will change how we can interact with spectral rooks or something like that, you know, we can feel that out. But it seems like the dungeons are leading Sybil towards something. And the last thing we will do here in Oubliette is we are going to go back to Telena and see if she has time for us, which she will for the sake of the story. I think that Stillnights is still on, and Sybil is itching to get back to Castle Revolving, especially if it's Stillnights. She actually says this to Telena. She says, "I'm actually leaving very soon. I have a waypoint locked and ready to return to in this labyrinth where I think if it's Stillnights, I can get through it pretty quickly. So, but if you need help, friends come first." And Telena smiles at that and says, "Friends, huh? Okay. Well, friends don't let friends run in half prepared. I think it's time I teach you a few of the tricks up my sleeve. Haven't you wondered why such a young woman such as myself is the leader of the clan of Keys?" And Sybil smiles and says, "It crossed my mind." And we're going to do something from another set of optional rules from the Patreon collection called Advanced Combat Training. Or excuse me, the Advanced Combat Rules. I'm calling it training. And basically, we're going to do an additional character creation sort of thing, where we're going to choose 2 approaches that our character, Sybil, likes to use and utilize in combat. And it's going to give us additional ways to use our cards in combat with rooks. The options for approaches are all-out attack, which is just big swings and brute force, stonewall defense, which is blocking attacks and using strength against the opponent, snipe from afar, you can guess what that does, trip and trap, which is special use of suits of the cards in battle, they do certain things, counter and feint, which is drawing cards, but sometimes that bonus can lead your enemy to add more to their cards, to their stack too, And then grapple within, which is getting onto a rook, staying on the rook, and fighting maybe from even inside of it. And let's go ahead and open this training up to Zorn as well, just for the sake of explaining more tactics and stuff like that. We'll say that Sybil had gotten the whole crew together and was ready to leave, but was just stopping by Telena's, and then Telena says, "No, you're coming with me." She takes the group to one of the Clan of Keys garages where all of their mounts are stored, and they do a lot of the work on them. Rooksmiths and the like work out of here, and the smells of the oils and the different things that are used in preparing rooks and rook parts just hits Sybil, and all of a sudden she's not in a rush. This is where she likes to be. And then Telena surprises her by trying to trip her, and she goes right down, I think. And Sybil looks up and blows some of her hair out of her face and says, "Hey, that's not exactly fair." And Telena says, "I'm sorry, do rooks fight fair? I don't know how you fight on the surface, but down here in the dungeons, we take any advantage we can. I've heard about your fighting style. I think it could use some work." And Sybil stands up and says, "Oh yeah? Alright." And we're going to get a little training montage. I think that Telena is probably a snipe from afar, trip and trap kind of person. But for Sybil, I definitely think she vibes with the trip and trap, but she wants to be up close and personal. So every time Telena attempts to get that distance from her, she's able to get close. I don't think Sybil is an all-out attack person. I want to say grapple within, but we're not really fighting a lot of like huge rooks down here. So we're going to teach Sybil how to trip and trap, and I feel like she has launched in multiple times just to defend a friend and hold the enemy at bay. So we're going to go with Stonewall Defense. The way that these work is now whenever we go into a combat, we're going to flip twice as many cards as our combat score, and our enemies are going to flip twice as many cards as their combat score, but we have new ways of using our attacks. For example, in Stonewall Defense, if we flip a Spades card, it says Unshakable. If this card is more than 3 over the enemy attack, I get to remove an enemy attack from their stack. So if I'm fighting something with 5 combat score, and I play a high Spades card, it's effectively like getting a critical hit. They draw one less card. I just remove 1 card from their stack. If it's a clubs, I can clash even if I'm up to 2 below the enemy attack. That's really good. It gives me more options with the lower cards that we may have. Then with trip and trap, it kind of lets us play around with the suits. For example, if it's a hearts card, so magic, it says Destabilize. If you have a winning hearts card in your hand, choose 2 cards in your hand that are the same suit, they can be any suit, and spend both on this enemy attack to beat it regardless of number. So we can just swap 2 low cards from a different suit because we have a winning magic attack. Do you know what I mean? Like, I could have a Jack of Hearts that would beat the 8 of diamonds of the enemy, but I also have a 3 and a 4 of clubs. Well, I can use that 3 and 4 of clubs to beat that 8 of diamonds instead of spending my Jack of Hearts. Pretty clever. There's other stuff as well, using the environment, snaring, but I'm going to save the specifics for when we get into a fight, and hopefully have a cool narrative way to describe them. Instead, what we see is a montage of Sybil, Telena, Zorn, and the Rooklings all learning new techniques for fighting. Tripping and trapping is particularly fun because this garage just turns into a hazard room, if you will, but eventually Sybil is able to close in with Telena, and instead of going all out on an attack to hit her friend, she gets up in her face and then waits for her to make a move to get further away and uses her Stonewall Defense to kind of continue tripping and trapping and waiting for her friends' teamwork to overcome the Clan of Keys leader. Huffing and puffing after the training, the whole crew is smiling and decide to go back and enjoy one more night of Stillnights here in the city of Oubliette. With this, let's say, second, third day, we'll say it's been 3 days since Sybil returned here with the Waypoint Stone. she is fully recovered. Her scores are back to their normal selves, and we're going to flip a card to see if Stillnights is still happening or not. Just a random yes/no oracle. We flip a Queen of Diamonds. That is a no because it is a red card, but there is an upside. So no, Stillnights is not still happening. I think that we get a few people returning. This is actually perfect. We get a few people returning to the Clan of Keys headquarters and saying the rooks are beginning to move. And we see a little bit of disappointment on Sybil's face because she wanted to get back into Castle Revolving before the rooks all started moving again. But she looks around at her friends, all smiling after learning new techniques and spending time with people down here in the city of Oubliette. And then she looks at Zorn and says, "Hey, do you mind if we just go wrap up that crazy revolving labyrinth? Or I'm just kind of I don't like projects left undone. Things unfinished." And Zorn looks at Sybil and kind of cocks their head and says, "Of course. I think there are answers everywhere waiting for us in the dungeons. You're not thinking of abandoning the quest for the Rookling Forge?" And Sybil shakes her head vigorously. No. Actually, that's actually why I asked. I didn't want you to think I was forgetting about it. Once we go and we finish this puzzle of a dungeon, it's really bothering my brain. Once we're done, I promise, all we'll do is look for this Rookling Forge. I want to know too. And she looks down at the ice Rookling and smiles and says, "I have a reason to care now too." And that's where we will end this session of Colossal Dungeons. Nice beach episode, and I hope that you enjoyed it. As always, you can find me on the social medias at Rene Plays Games for, basic posts. But if you want to get in contact with me and talk about games or just be friends, you can join the DMs After Dark Discord, or you can email me at reneplaysgamespod@gmail.com. If you'd like to get on an episode of Perspective Checks in 2026, now's the time to email me. Let's get something scheduled and figure out what we're going to talk about. Rate and review if you haven't already for the algorithm, whatever that may be. And until next time, take a break. And couldn't we all use like a week of just all of the awful rook-like analogs, wink wink, of the world just shutting up and shutting off? We can hope.